Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, your go-to source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We hope you tune in often for all things people management, organizational development and change, organizational leadership, and social impact related. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI podcast episode, I talk with Michael Vann about strategic planning and growth, particularly within second stage companies. Michael Vann, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's really a pleasure to have you joining me today. Michael, you come to us from the strategy space where you help organizations with their strategic formulations and trying to think through their growth, and SWOT analyses and various things related to their growth and development. I think this is super important, particularly in this time of COVID pandemic, as we're trying to, as a lot of organizations are fighting just to stay alive. I think a lot of these second stage companies, the types that you tend to work with the most, are also, a lot of them are very vulnerable right now. And so it'll be really interesting to talk through that with you and get your ideas on how you're approaching these topics with your clients and trying to help organizations find sustainable strategic approaches to riding out the storm, so to speak, and move on into, hopefully right on into the sunset post-pandemic, right?
Yeah, no, it was a fascinating, I guess tumultuous would probably be a better term, from mid-March when this hit through probably, I don't know, maybe mid-April or so, that first month to 6 weeks of watching this black swan event suddenly take all these businesses that, were working towards implementing strong strategies and building their companies, and then completely seeing all of that just put into doubt and how they responded to it. And I think one of the fascinating things was it was indiscriminate as to which organizations it hit. We had companies that we thought would be, great. They're recession proof typically, because they're in these types of industry. Like, as much as food or restaurant business can be challenging, people are always going out to eat, so you can weather a 10 or 20% shutdown or reduction in sales, but then suddenly be told overnight, no, you're shut. But that company over there, they're allowed to stay open. So it was a wild experience to deal with the differences of how winners and losers were chosen arbitrarily by the government.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we get started today, just for my listeners, so they get a little bit more background to you, I just want to briefly share a little bit about your background and your company, and then give you a chance to add anything, and then we'll jump on into our discussion. Michael is the president of the Vann Group, LLC. He joined the firm in 1999 and is responsible for the day-to-day management and strategic direction of the firm. Michael has over 20 years of strategic consulting and transactional advisory experience. He's a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, a licensed predictable success practitioner, and is a licensed facilitator of the Edward Lowe Foundation's Peer Perspectives program. He is also a member of the Lowe Foundation Strategic Integration Growth SWAT team, which provides support to growth-oriented second stage companies. I could go on and on about your personal background, but let me read a little bit more about your business. The Vann Group is a multi-generational family-owned business that provides strategic consulting and transactional advisory services to the owners of privately held businesses. The Vann Group is an affiliate of the ROCG Americas. ROCG is an international professional services and consulting firm with offices throughout North America, Europe, and Asia, and the Asia Pacific region. They are the only international firms specializing in the areas of strategy, finance operations, and business transitions for the privately owned and emerging growth enterprises. What an interesting and fascinating background, Michael, and it really is truly a pleasure to have you join us. Anything you would like to add as we get started?
No, I think one of the unique things on our background that doesn't sometimes come through, and that is that it's multi-generational, but it's a father-son team, which when we get into succession and transition planning puts us in a rather unique spot, because you've got the guy with a lot of gray hair and the guy with a little bit of gray hair sitting at the table looking at those internal transitions. So provides a really fun dynamic to be working with your father after 20 years and doing that type of work.
Wonderful. Awesome. As we get started, maybe you can provide a little bit more background and information to your approach to strategy with second stage companies.
Sure. I think, our strategic approach, which we've been doing for 20 years, started initially with a lot of work around the Jim Collins, framework of good to great and built to last, and starting to work with companies into those mindsets of, how do we get the right people on the bus, and where's the bus going to go, and the technology as an accelerator and the flywheel and all those great ideas. And back then, planning was done kind of just on an annual basis, right? We'd come together, we would do an offsite and have, a session, and we'd come up with a plan, and then maybe we got it implemented, maybe we didn't. Over the past, I'd say half a dozen years or so, it started to transition with the rise of Rockefeller Habits and Scaling Up, and EOS from Gino Wickman, and some of these systems that started to take these concepts and start to build a tool set and a consistency of execution around them. So we've seen a lot more activity with our clients, rather than just an annual planning. It's now very engaged. We're meeting with them on a quarterly basis. We're doing those annual sessions, and a lot of times we're engaging with them on a weekly basis, which has been a big transition for them. And it's probably evolved more so where that vision side of it, where, we're going to be in 10 years is not as important in those daily conversations as it is about dealing with our leadership and organizational issues. How do we develop our culture? How do we train and mentor and coach? So it's a big difference from, the strategy mindset of looking at markets to the internal focus that we've seen over the past few years emerge.
Yeah, and how did you end up focusing on second tier businesses?
It kind of happened by accident. I initially got started in my career in corporate, working Fortune 500 companies, doing a lot of work in the government space. And when I got bored and sick of that, I came home to the family firm, which was, targeted towards small and mid-size companies from an accounting standpoint. And so that was always the family history. And I ended up going to work with a company called Allied Reliability, which at the time was probably started working on a consulting basis, doing a couple $1 million. And over the course of the 10, 12 years I was working with them, we scaled it to 50 million global operations and sold. So they fit the prototypical second stage company, just rapid amount of growth, privately held, added lots of jobs, created a lot of economic value. And they, just fell in love with that type of company. It wasn't big corporate where you couldn't get anything done. And it wasn't that early stage struggle of a startup, which, didn't candidly have the money to pay you and had a pretty good chance they weren't going to be successful. So, it's kind of, I fell into it by accident and really just found the passion for working with those companies that have that ability to grow and scale.
Yeah, and scaling can be really difficult. And I mean, you understand what it's like working in a family-run business. And not that all small businesses that scale are family-run, but often they are initially. And scaling from that first stage to the second stage can be a big hurdle. Scaling from that second stage to further growth can be another huge hurdle. What are just a couple of tips that you would give to most second stage companies as they're thinking about the maturity of their organization, getting the systems, processes, procedures, policies in place to enable sustainable growth and scaling.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we talk to, and we, initially get engaged with the CEO owner level, and we talked about the ability to position the company so it can run without them. And that usually kind of puts the light on in their head and go, yeah, wouldn't that be great if I wasn't here 80 hours a week? How do I start to go and do that? So I think one of that mindset for an owner is the ability to start to let go and think about running the company from a scaling standpoint, that it can work without you versus I have to be involved in everything. And when you do that, it opens up a whole different level of decision making in their organizations, right? It's no longer them as the bottleneck making all those decisions. Now they have a team. And, candidly, a lot of times in these companies, those teams aren't prepared for that. They're generally, tier two, like they're managers, right? They work in the business every day, and maybe they're starting to do a little bit of strategic thinking, but so it's a big step up to start to think about the business as an overall enterprise. So, for an owner to be able to allow their teams to do that and give them the processes to do that is critical to be able to scale, getting that team engaged.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what you just described is a common problem for a lot of leaders, not just those who are scaling or second stage companies. Just this idea of releasing control, letting go, delegating more, empowering your employees, and encouraging and supporting their ownership over their pieces, and really driving that robust collaborative discussion that can generate new, great ideas. That's nice to say, but it's hard to do, and it's something that a lot of organizations really struggle with. But particularly, like you said, I think small and growing organizations where the leader is used to doing everything, having everything run through them, that's hard to let go of because it's their baby and they're so passionate and invested. And it's not just about ego necessarily. It might be ego, but it also is just their passion, and they want to see this be successful, and it's really hard to let that go.
Yeah, and the other challenge a lot of them have too is that, if they've gotten to a certain size, they've had people who have been there with them from the beginning, who they've trusted and relied on, who are really good at their job, but aren't able to make that leap to kind of that next level of thinking and looking at the organizational holistically and in the big picture. So that can be really painful for them in the decision-making process, because they may have to take this person who's been by their side and say, you know what, we've outgrown you. Doesn't mean you don't have a role here on our bus, but we're going to bring in someone over you to who's got more of that holistic look for you and that different skill set. So really hard for companies at this stage to make those hard people decisions because of the inherent loyalty that they have to them.
Yeah, and that's good. That's good that they have that loyalty and that commitment. But you don't want to shortchange the rest of your employees and the potential that the company has on over-reliance on someone who's just not ready and able to fill the new scope of the role that they need to have, right?
Yes.
And that's so common. That happens in a lot of organizations, not just second stage organizations, but it's particularly challenging when you just think of the scope and scale of the work that needs to be done in a rapid growth company, in a scaling company. That's just not for everybody. And it doesn't mean that they weren't successful in the past. It doesn't mean that they can't be successful in the future, but perhaps that role needs to be tweaked a bit, something that's more suitable to their skill set, their talents, and their capabilities.
Yeah, and usually when we're starting with companies, one of the first places we start is looking at their organizational chart. How is it aligned? And usually with these companies, we find it's not based on how the company should operate. It's based on necessity. So Sally has this duty, that duty, and that one, and they're really not related to her core job, what she was hired for. But we gave them to her because she was good at it, and now she's become a bottleneck and not taking on the right thing. So it takes a fair amount of time to untangle, the organizational chart to get everyone into the right seats and roles they can succeed in.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about those bottlenecks, because that's a huge problem for organizations where you have decision-making authority really um, isolated into specific areas. What do you do in working with organizations to help them think through that and to help them open up the pipeline for decision making in key areas of the business?
A lot of it is just utilizing an issue solving process with them in our meetings. So you get them to do it on a weekly basis, but you kind of start with the question, well, what's frustrating you? What's causing your pain points today in work? Who's pissing you off? That type of stuff, and let it get out on the table with the group, and to talk about it in a constructive way, not to point fingers, not to let the personal side of it come into it, not get defensive. Let's say, okay, this is the issue. How do we solve it? And then what are our actions and tasks to do out of it? We're very big on the thought that if you're going to tackle an issue, you don't leave the issue until you solve it, and you don't walk away without having definitive actions that you're going to take to resolve it. So getting our teams to think in those terms, and it's not as personal. You've got a whole group conversation about it. You get different opinions and perspectives, and you create that consensus for it, versus sometimes the one-on-one that can, make someone upset.
Yeah, and those difficult conversations that have to occur in these people management decisions, that is a challenge. And I've seen in the past that a lot of CEOs and second stage businesses, or C-suite, senior level executives, they're not comfortable with having those discussions. They're not comfortable having, making those hard decisions. How would you coach a C-suite executive on that process as they're thinking through the people? Are they in the right place? Are they doing the right work? These people that they've known for forever, that they trust, they love, they've relied on. How do you coach them through how to have those difficult discussions?
One of the tools that we use with it when we get our groups together, is from EOS, is this people analyzer tool, which allows you to rank your people against their core values, and then the get it, want it, the capacity to do the job. So what it does is it goes, all right, here's what our organization believes and our core values, and then here's the seat on the bus with the get it, want it capacity. So it allows us to have those conversations within the framework of the core values, which takes some of the pressure off of, the things we can't really put our fingers on about it. Because we're talking about, well, it was this core value and they did this, and it doesn't really reflect what we're trying to do as an organization. And again, the group is having that conversation, and it comes out that way, versus, that individual leader or manager who might be a little reluctant to get into some confrontation because they're not quite sure how to frame it. So we find that exercise works a lot to make people conversations a group thing, because usually if someone's problematic, it's not just that one person who they report to is having an issue with them. It's their coworkers, it's other departments. So it brings it to light and allows the organization to address it from the organizational perspective rather than just the one-on-one case.
Yeah, keeping it from being a personal issue. It's about the health and the success of the organization as a whole.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you fit here? Do you align with our core values? And then we have the conversation about their seat. They can be the right person for our organization, but maybe they're in the wrong seat. So by looking at it from both sides, we're able to figure out the difference, which removes some of that bias that we can resolve because we're looking at someone's not doing their job well, but maybe people, or vice versa.
Yeah, and we don't need to think of it. I would tell a C-suite executive who's struggling with having that kind of conversation. They're worried about letting this person down. They're worried about disappointing this person, hurting this person. And certainly we could do it in a really clumsy way that could have all those results. But it doesn't have to. And we have to also think about it in terms of maximizing the capacity of that individual and giving them the best chance for success and growth. And the best chance for success and growth doesn't happen when someone is in over their head drowning in the deep end, right? If they're not well aligned, chances are that person, they know it. They know that they're struggling. They know that people are relying on them and they're not coming through. It causes stress. It causes anxiety, and their performance isn't great. Their trajectory for their career isn't great if they're not performing well. And so when we can have those hard discussions, help assess the situation, realign people, get them in the right place, then we give them a chance to be successful again. We give them a chance. It might be a vertical move. It might even be a small step down. But sometimes it's that small step down into a slightly different area that reinvigorates somebody. It gives them the chance to recalibrate their efforts, and then it can relaunch them in their career, and people can find great success. So I like to frame it in terms of, this is a development plan for you to find greater success in your career. There may be a little bit of pain in the short run, but we want to help you be successful and maximize your potential.
Yeah, and it changes the whole dynamic of that conversation. It's not threatening to them. And it's been amazing, over the years watching our companies as we've done that. We've moved someone from a seat where they didn't look like a good organizational fit, but as soon as we get them into a place where they could excel, everything about them changed. We went, oh my God, this is an A player now. It was just wrong fit. So by addressing it from that standpoint, we're able to get value out of someone who is a good person. They were just miscast.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point too, because pre-COVID pandemic, now we have record high unemployment rate, 40 plus million people out of work over the last couple of months, and businesses are struggling. Prior to all of that hitting, though, we had record low unemployment rates. We had a hyper competitive labor market. It was a really tight labor market where organizations were really struggling to get good qualified applicants, particularly in high skilled jobs, to be able to perform roles. And so companies don't have the luxury of just saying, this person, Peter principle, this person was elevated to past their level of ability, and now they're incompetent. In a lot of organizations, traditionally, that person would end up just getting fired. But we don't have that luxury in a hyper competitive labor market where things are so tight. Instead, we can take a second look at that person. We can recognize and continue to understand the value that they can bring and add. We can recognize that maybe we made the mistake in putting them in the position that they're in, that they're not succeeding. And then we don't lose a valuable person that's going to be really hard to replace, right?
Yep, and all the associated costs of replacing them. The burden on everybody else, the actual dollar cost, the training cost for someone new, and it still can be a bit of a crapshoot whether or not that's the right person that you've replaced. So
absolutely. We often think, employees do this when they're looking for other jobs, greener pastures, but employers do this too. Like we often think, we just need this quick fix. Let's get this one person out, get this new person in. That's going to solve everything. That's going to make all of our processes better, and we're going to be a humming, fine-tuned, engine at that point. And hiring's not that simple. Like hiring a good person and getting them in and functioning and working with the team, that's a hard thing to do well, especially at the highest levels of an organization. And so to just assume that this person's not working out super well, so we're just going to get rid of them and replace them with someone else who's going to be the magic wand to solve all of our problems, that's an incredibly naive perspective, I think.
Definitely, and particularly, with the type of companies we deal with the second stage, because they don't have the level of sophistication with their hiring processes yet. So a lot of it is still, they hire by instinct, so different sets of questions for different people. Hey, that guy loved the Patriots. We talked great. They're good people. We should hire them. Versus, getting deep into those probing questions that you need to about their cultural fit and their decision-making abilities. So it happens a lot more at that size company. So they swing and miss a lot more often.
Yeah, I think so. I've seen a lot of examples of that too. I was talking with a senior leader. This was maybe 6 months ago. But I was talking with a senior leader at a company who was really proud to explain to me his process for making final hiring decisions. And so he's like, I got the secret. I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm listening. I'm a little skeptical, but I'm listening. And he tells me his way of making final decision is kind of the camping test. Who would I want to go on a camping trip for the weekend with? Who would I enjoy spending that weekend camping? And that's the person I'm going to hire because I know that they'll be a good fit with the company. And of course, in my mind, I'm like having red flags, going off all over the place. I'm like, that is the last way you want to be making a hiring decision.
That's how you find a friend, not how you find an employee.
Yeah, and well, it just introduces all these biases and all these factors that you're not supposed to really consider when making a decision. You're not truly hiring someone who, is necessarily the best qualified or skilled. And chances are, if you have that kind of an approach, chances are you're going to be hiring someone who's like you, who thinks like you, talks like you, acts like you, which is not actually what most organizations need. They need someone who's skilled, who will, there'll be healthy give and take and push, a pushback and allow you to do your best work. So you don't just want a clone of you coming in for a new position. You want to really push the envelope a bit and have people who will round out your team. So anyways, I thought that was just a funny comment. And he was incredibly proud of this insight and very confident in his approach. Like he knew that he had figured it out. Like that was the answer for making good hiring decisions. And that's hard. That's hard to have a discussion with someone who is so confident in what they've determined. When I'm thinking, oh my gosh, for like 10 reasons right off the top of my head, that's a really bad idea.
Yeah. No, and it's even, you think about it, like if you hire that way you have all these different roles in your organization, which require different styles and different skill sets, and to put it on that, you're going to end up with a lot of people who are just like the owner.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you mentioned culture fit earlier too. That's important. Like we need people who can work well with the team. Sometimes that gets corrupted though. Sometimes leaders, they use culture fit as an excuse to hire people just like them. So you don't fit the culture because you're different than me. You have a different background, a different mindset, a different worldview. Have a different upbringing than me. And so you don't fit with our culture. That's not what culture fit means, right?
Right. No, it can quickly get corrupted, where if they're not careful about it, it's do you fit? Well, rather than understanding how it fits is, do they fit the same core values? Do they fit our guiding principles here? Do they treat people the way we want to be treated? Recognizing they all have different interests and outside and different styles, but how do we get that alignment?
Yeah, perfect. Well, Michael, we're about out of time. It's really been a pleasure talking with you today. Before we finish up, though, I want to give you a chance to share with the listeners how they could get connected with you and learn more about your business and how you might be able to help them.
Sure. You can find us on the web at Vann, which is VANN-group.com. And I think also our email is letsgo@van-group.com. You can find us there. As John said, we work with, predominantly second stage companies that are looking at how they build sustainable organizations that can grow and scale and operate without an owner having to be involved in the day-to-day operations. So if you fit that profile and are interested in learning about how we can work with you, we'd love to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Michael. I encourage my listeners to check you out and get in contact. It's really, truly been a pleasure talking with you, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.